House press corps wanted, so they tried to snuff it out. The conduct of a handful of so-called reporters during President Trump's news conference was disgraceful beyond measure. This is not journalism, this is narcissism. Naturally, the boorish Jim Acosta of CNN was the instigator. As is his habit, Acosta doesn't ask questions, he makes accusations and argues. Almost daily, he does it with the press secretary. Wednesday, he did it with the president. After more back and forth, he called Acosta a rude, terrible person and said CNN should be ashamed of itself. That should have been enough. Acosta got the attention he wanted and got Trump's goat, giving his network video it could make hay out of for days. Besides, there were scores of other reporters raising their hands to be called on. Acosta refused to give up the microphone after asking the president multiple questions, and being told to sit down. A female White House staffer even attempted to pry the microphone away from Acosta, but he held on to it. Then, he turned his belligerence on a White House female staffer. That was enough for President Trump. The president, clearly angry now and stepping away from the podium as if he might bolt the room, pointed at him and said forcefully to put down the mic. Finally, Acosta sat down, then stood up to argue again, interrupting another reporter. That reporter from NBC praised Acosta and picked up the baton by making his own accusation disguised as a question. He mentioned Trump's attacks on Democrats and asked the president, "Why are you pitting Americans against one another?" Trump, to his credit, actually answered in a substantive way, but that didn't satisfy because the reporter didn't really ask a question. He too just wanted to make an accusation and argue on camera. There was a time not long ago when young journalists were taught not to become the story. Apparently, many news organizations have flipped that lesson on its head. But we are witnessing something more insidious here than media trash talk. Plain and simple, we are watching expressions of personal hatred. Yes, it's true that most journalists lean far left and their bias sticks out like so many sore thumbs. That's been true for a long time, but political bias is an insufficient explanation for the Jim Acostas of our time. They hate Trump. They really hate him. There's nothing professional about it. They are not alone. Take a poll of almost any major newsroom in America and the vast majority of those working there, if they are being honest, will confess that they too can't stand the existence or the sound of Trump. Or try to imagine Acosta and his ilk behaving in similarly hostile fashion toward Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. Keep trying, but you can't imagine it because it never happened. Both of those polls lied to journalists repeatedly, yet you can bet 90% still voted straight Democratic. Even if they didn't like Obama or Clinton, the political reporters would never dare accuse them publicly of anything, argue with them or interrupt them. Even when skeptical, they were respectful. Recall how Obama used to spend 10, 15 and even 20 minutes answering a single question, without interruption. Many in the press corps may have found him overbearingly arrogant. They may have resented the way he looked down on them and bristled at critical stories or tough questions. They knew he started more leak investigations than any other president, and might have feared him because his Justice Department wiretapped a Fox News reporter during a leak case. But they would never interrupt him or insult him or refuse to give up the microphone. White House press credentials are not a universal right. There are implicit expectations of proper behavior, and the White House decision to suspend Acosta's credential is warranted. Just as Acosta can't go into a movie theater and yell fire when there is no fire, he should not have the right to hijack a presidential press conference to suit his own ego. It is also long past time for his colleagues, including those from other outlets, to remind him that his shameful conduct is making all of them look bad. More important, scenes like Wednesday's further erode the public's already declining trust of the media and fuel resistance to the First Amendment. The anti-Trump antics are no longer a sideshow. America has serious problems as well as dangerous enemies, and the mere prospect of Trump, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell working together is the best news we could have hoped for Wednesday. Instead, it was overshadowed by a few narcissists chasing their own vanity.
A federal judge who you appointed, has just ruled that you must give CNN reporter Jim Acosta his press pass back. Your reaction to the ruling?
It's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out, or we'll stop the news conference.
What are your rules going to be? What is it that you're saying?
They're doing them now.
This is over the line, and you lose your press.
They're doing them now. I mean, we'll have rules of decorum. You know, you can't keep asking questions. We had a lot of reporters in that room, many reporters in that room, and they were unable to ask questions because this guy gets up and starts, you know, doing what he's supposed to be doing for him and for CNN, and, you know, just shouting out questions and making statements, too. But I will say this, look, nobody believes in the First Amendment more than I do. And if I think somebody's acting out of sorts, I will leave. I'll say, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and I'll leave. And those reporters will not be too friendly to whoever it is that's acting up.
Sean Spicer is a former White House press secretary and a senior advisor for America First Action PAC, and he joins us now. Sean, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Sandra.
I want to get to this news that we had breaking in the last hour, Sean, on this judge handing CNN a victory in this bid to restore Jim Acosta's White House press pass. We are just now getting a bit of a statement here from the White House. I want to first get your reaction. I'm going to take a look at this. But get your reaction first to Judge Timothy Kelly ruling that Acosta's First Amendment rights overruled the White House's right to have orderly press conferences.
Well, look, I'm no lawyer, but I'm a little shocked in the sense that I think that there's nothing that prohibited Mr. Acosta from writing on the White House's actions. He was free to continue to write. CNN had multiple reporters that had access to the White House. But I think there's a line between saying that the First Amendment guarantees you to go anywhere and do anything you want and to have reasonable expectations, as the White House has asked for, with respect to his level of professionalism and behavior. And that's what this is about. Obviously, whether he has access or not, he, like so many other journalists around this country, can write about the White House or any subject that they deem necessary or of interest. So I think there's a difference, and I think we're getting lost in grouping every single discussion into the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't give you free access to go wherever you please. It gives you the ability to express yourself, for a free press to write things uninhibited, for Congress not to abridge the ability of that press to conduct itself.
Sean, let me just get you to some of the argument here, because we're going to run out of time, and I think it's important to get this in here. The judge, which, by the way, I want to point out was a Trump appointee. He was appointed last year, bipartisan support in the Senate. He also agreed with CNN's argument that the White House did not provide due process. He said that the White House decision-making was so shrouded, and I'm quoting him, shrouded in mystery that the government could not tell me who made the decision. And before I move on, I want to get in the statement from the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, at the White House, is now responding. Today, the court made clear that there is no absolute First Amendment right to access the White House. In response to the court, we will temporarily reinstate the reporter's hard pass. We will also further develop rules and processes to ensure fair and orderly press conferences in the future. There must be decorum at the White House. Do you have any idea what changes they might have in store?
Well, look, here's the answer. I actually believe, as press secretary, I was very liberal with handing out passes to the White House. I believe in a fair and free, robust press, but I think that there should be some level of agreed-upon decorum and professionalism. That is something that bodes well for journalism. It bodes well for just civil discourse, and I don't think that that has anything to do with being able to ask tough questions. There's a difference between to ask what you want and behavior that I think is over the line, disrespectful to the office of the president.
Before I let you go, do you have any idea what Sarah Sanders might be referencing here? Was that ever discussed when you were at the White House, further develop rules and processes to ensure fair and orderly press conferences in the future? What, I mean, do you have any?
No, but I think it may go to the judge's point, which is that there has to be some way of saying, if you violate this, then this is how it will be dealt with. If we all need to agree to the certain protocols that will exist, in terms of, handing off off the microphone, etc. I think that it behooves all of us at this point, it's sad to say, to actually get some of this down in writing as far as how things will be dealt with if there's concerns, but also an agreed upon set of protocols and behavior that journalists will agree to abide by. That doesn't mean that their questions can get filtered or censored or anything, but I think that there is a level of decorum that is afforded to the office of the presidency, that maybe that they can sit down and work with the White House Correspondents Association to come to some agreement as to what that would look like, and to have some sort of agreed upon resolution dispute system.
Did you agree with the White House's decision to revoke the pass in the first place?
I think that it would have been better to sit down with the White House Correspondents Association to point out why this behavior is not only disrespectful to the President of the United States, but also to fellow journalists, and see if there could have been some resolution to how to address it, specifically with Mr. Acosta, and then generally going forward. I would have thought that that would have been a better way to keep things, to keep the temperature from getting as high as it did. But again, I think it's hard to make that decision from where I sit, and not having been in the day-to-day as Sarah and some of the others were. Right. So it's easy to say these things without having the context of what had happened before, after, or the preceding days. But I think there's no question that Mr. Acosta's behavior is both disrespectful to the White House and disrespectful to his colleagues, it's not about him having his own show when he's at these press conferences. It's about all of the reporters being able to have an opportunity.
We'll see what happens next. Sean Spicer, thank you for coming on the program.
You bet, Sandra.
All right.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.